Thank you very much for being here today. The latest COVID-19 numbers, as of the state's numbers as of Tuesday, there were 349 new confirmed cases, bringing the total in the Commonwealth to 116,770. 12 new deaths, bringing the total to deaths in Massachusetts to 8,729. Boston's numbers, we did not get today's numbers yet, so I only have as of yesterday. 31 new cases, a total of 15,263 cases in Boston, and there were 4 new deaths yesterday, bringing the total to 752. And as always, our prayers go out to those that are sick and suffering from COVID-19, and the families who've lost loved ones. Want you to know that you're in our thoughts and prayers. For the week ending August 22nd, the 7-day average positive test rate was 2.3%, which is down from 2.7%, so we saw a nice little decrease there. The cumulative positive rate since the beginning of the pandemic is down to about 10%. At one point, if you remember, we were at about 38% here in Boston. Emergency room visits for COVID symptoms remain very low. The number of COVID patients in ICUs remain very low as well in the city. The average daily new cases in Boston remains around 40. So if you take the numbers and you add them up, it's about 40. Higher new case numbers in recent weeks are due to, in part, significant increasing in testing that we've been doing. Last week, the number of tests in Boston went up again, so we've had, I believe, 4 consecutive weeks now of additional tests. The average test last week every day was 2,028 tests, people tested per day in Boston. That's a 10% increase and more than double what we're doing earlier this summer, so we are testing many, many more people. Citywide, we have more than 20 testing sites, including mobile sites, that are moving in areas with the greatest needs. Many of the sites, testing is available to you at no cost. Our free mobile site is at Jubilee Christian Church in Mattapan today and through Saturday. It's free and open to anyone, regardless of your symptoms. You can also get a full map of testing locations. Go to boston.gov/coronavirus. That's boston.gov/coronavirus. We're going to keep working to provide more and more testing, guidance and information and support. And we need everyone to keep doing your part as well as we move forward here. I just want to remind everyone again about the need to constantly wash your hands with soap and warm water. Avoid large gatherings. Stay 6 feet away from other people. Wear a mask when you're around people, when you're going for a walk. If you operate a business, follow the guidelines and make sure your employees and customers can follow them as well. So take time to explain to your employees and customers the guidelines. And we need to continue to remain very diligent here. As you saw the last 7 days, we've seen a decrease in positive testing. That's a good thing. We want to continue that. We have worked together to bring COVID numbers down all across our city. And last week, every neighborhood except one tested below 3.5% positive rate. East Boston is one neighborhood where positive test rates have been higher. Representative in East Boston, we're working to make sure we continue to get messaging out to the community. We launched an action plan to work with the community. We're mobilizing teams to provide safety materials and educate residents and businesses, using the languages spoken in the neighborhoods, including English, Spanish, and Arabic. At MBTA stations and key intersections in East Boston, including Maverick Square, Orient Heights, Wood Island, the airport, and Central Square. We're expanding into neighborhood parks at these times. People gathering, playing soccer. We're asking people again to follow the guidelines that have been laid out by the City of Boston, by the Parks Department. We're distributing care kits and talking with residents and constantly letting residents know what's happening. Those kits that we're giving out include hand sanitizer, masks, testing information, and COVID information. We are sharing information on the importance of social distancing, of face covering, hand hygiene, and avoiding gatherings. We're answering questions that people might have about COVID-19. We're explaining how to practice safety in the home where somebody has symptoms or has tested positive. We're making it clear that anyone can and should get tested, regardless of your immigration status. No information about your status will be asked when you go for testing. Making clear that residents can file confidential complaints with the Boston Public Health Commission if employers or businesses aren't following safety guidelines. We're also working with businesses to help them follow the guidelines. Business outreach started today in multiple languages. We're making sure management and staff know the regulations and have the access to PPE and prevention efforts like social distancing and hygiene. Distributing COVID checklists, fact sheets, and signs, including posters that demonstrate the importance of wearing face coverings. Reminding employers that they need to report to the Boston Public Health Commission when they have an employee that tests positive. We are looking at tightening up regulations around gatherings in public spaces, but hope that it doesn't come to that. This is an all-hands-on-deck effort, and we're working together, all of us, including all the electeds. In the city, cross-departmental teams in the City of Boston, including the Boston Public Health Commission, the Office of Neighborhood Services, the Office of Small Businesses, Inspectional Services, Boston Transportation Department, Emergency Management, Police, Fire, EMS, medical and social service providers in the community, union leaders who represent people working and living in the neighborhood in East Boston, church officials and clergy who have helped get the message out at Mass, and other services over the weekend. We need to make sure we're taking this really seriously because of the number being so high. We're going to do whatever it takes to get the message to people that COVID-19 is still with us and all the precautions that we've been taking are still very much necessary. We're going to continue to work together on new strategies and solutions, and we need residents. We need the residents to spread the word and work with us. We also know the economic conditions impact the COVID numbers. Multi-generational housing, families living in housing, mother, father, child, grandparents. Higher rate of overcrowded in housing. People who have to work outside of the home coming back into the home. We're bringing resources to those families, supporting them when workers need to stay home is a big part of our solution. Food access is another area that we've done a lot of work on the last 5 months. We've had a major effort in the spring working with many partners to serve over 2 million meals in the City of Boston since the COVID crisis started. We adapted and kept it going over the summer through the Boston Public Schools and the Boston Center for Youth and Families and all of our partners. We are planning to maintain food access over the fall and the winter. The USDA did extend the meal site waiver to September 18th so we can keep feeding young people safely, and we're asking them again to extend it beyond September 18th through the end of the year. I'm joining other cities to ask them to extend it to support remote and hybrid learning plans. So what that does, it helps us, it allows us the opportunity to be able to deliver meals if our kids are not in school. Our school plan that we announced last week, the latest start date, or the last group of kids to go in, will be November, I think it's November 17th for high schoolers. So that means there's a lot of meals throughout the fall and early winter that we'll be still delivering to homes. We need Congress and the White House to bring more relief to Americans hit hard by this pandemic. But we're not waiting for help here in Boston. We're using all the resources and all the partnerships that we have to make sure that hungry residents in the City of Boston have food. One vital access point is the Boston Housing Authority. They house over 58,000 residents, including 9%, which is 9% of the Boston population. Today, I can announce a partnership between the Boston Housing Authority and local businesses and nonprofits to get hundreds of thousands of meals to vulnerable residents throughout the end of the year. This plan leverages $2.5 million in federal aid still available to the CARES Act. It will provide up to 230,000 meals to around 4,100 low-income households throughout the month of December. Nearly $1.7 million will support the Boston Housing Authority's family meal sites in partnership with City Fresh Food, Commonwealth Kitchen, Haley House, and the YMCA. City Fresh Food is a business of color based in Roxbury that hires employees from the community. Commonwealth Kitchen is a women-led nonprofit incubator that serves many areas of color and women-owned businesses. Haley House is a nonprofit in Roxbury that employs people who face barriers to other jobs. The YMCA of Greater Boston has been one of the key partners in food distribution since the beginning of the pandemic, and actually, quite honestly, long before that. We're going to use over $730,000 for door-to-door meal delivery to seniors facing food insecurity. Our partners in that work is Ethos, a nonprofit in Jamaica Plain that helps over 3,000 seniors and people with disabilities stay in their home. They operate the Meals on Wheels program, as well as many meal sites in partnership with our Age Strong Commission here in the city. Since March, they've expanded and adapted their operational dynamic dramatically. Meal sites have been safe to more seniors, and people with disabilities could stay at home. Many volunteers and caregivers are also in high-risk categories, and that's another challenge that we have. Back then, we helped Ethos with $559,000 from the Resiliency Fund to include over 850 caregivers in their service. That means they're helping not just the clients, but also the caregivers who need support. Many of the caregivers that work in these industries are low-income families, and they need help as well. In addition to the partnership with the Boston Housing Authority, we're providing another $500,000 from the Resiliency Fund so that they can continue their work as well. This grant will help fulfill the daily needs as the pandemic continues. It will also make sure that it is a trusted person each day to check in, reduce isolation, and connect seniors to services and support. Seniors need to see consistency, and having the same person is extremely helpful. I'd like to thank Ethos for their partners and all the partners that work with Ethos, the Boston Housing Authority, our Age Strong Commission, our Office of Food Access, for all the great work that they have done. The Boston Resiliency Fund has distributed over $25 million from the day we started collecting money to provide COVID testing and other life-saving services during this pandemic. Over $14 million of those funds have provided food access and other basic needs in vulnerable households all across our city. Today, I can also announce two new initiatives from the Boston Public Library to help bridge the digital divide in the city of Boston. This is a vital equity issue, and it's one that's more clear during the era of COVID-19. We do this work on a number of fronts. We created an Office of Broadband and Digital Equity to be a leader in this work. Our digital equity fund, provides grants to community organizations that expand access to technology and the internet. Our Wicked Free Wi-Fi system brings free internet access to over 100 points across the city in all of our Main Street districts. Digital access is also central to Boston Public Schools' plan for remote learning. We are currently taking steps to understand the technology needs for seniors in our public housing residents. The Boston Public Library has been a long leader in free access to technology, and they are leading again in this crisis. This week, the Boston Public Library launched an outdoor Wi-Fi program. It provides internet access 24 hours a day in the public spaces around 9 Boston Public Library branches. It allows users to socially distance while using internet for free. The locations were chosen based on data reflecting at-home broadband access, household incomes, and the availability of outdoor seating. The branches are Mattapan, High Park, East Boston, South End, Common Square in Dorchester, Parker Hill and Mission Hill, Grove Hall in Dorchester, Roxbury, Eggleston Square in Roxbury, Jamaica Plain, and the Honan branch in Alston. The other new Boston Public Library program is Public Computer Access. BPL buildings remain closed for indoor use, but now you can sign up to use a computer in a socially distanced space within the Central Library at Copley Square. You can book 2-hour slots Monday through Thursday. You can go to app.bpl.org/computers or just call 617-536-5400. As a reminder, digital borrowing of online items was expanded at the start of the pandemic and remains extremely popular here in the city. And BPL To Go allows you to reserve and pick up physical books and other items at every branch citywide, except for those branches that are under renovation. For more information on Boston Public Libraries, you can go to bpl.org. Voting information: the state primary election is a week from today, Tuesday, September 1st. Early voting is underway currently in the city of Boston and runs through Friday. You can vote here at City Hall Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. Tomorrow you can get to vote at 4 other locations in our neighborhoods: the BCYF Perkins Community Center in Dorchester, Mildred Ave Middle School in Mattapan, St. Nicholas, excuse me if I apologize, Orthodox Church in Rosendale, and the Margarita Munez Academy in Jamaica Plain. All voting locations are using existing safety cleaning protocol and are accessible to voters with disabilities. We're asking you, when you go to vote, make sure you're wearing a mask. We're also making sure that voting by mail is an option. It's a safe way to exercise your vote. Today, August 26th, is the deadline for requesting a vote by mail ballot. If you happen to be listening to this and you want one, you can drop your application off here at City Hall at a box right inside the door there where you vote, just to get a mail-in ballot. We've received about 90,000 requests and we're processing those requests as they arrive daily. These are for mail-in ballots, 90,000. I encourage anyone who has a mail-in ballot to complete it and return it as soon as possible. You can either mail it or you can drop it off. You can hand deliver it to an early vote location, or there's 2 drop boxes here at City Hall. Inside the main 3rd floor entrance behind me, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or outside on the 2nd floor entrance on Congress Street until 5 p.m. Tomorrow, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you can do that, and then on Friday, 9 to 5 again. If you are at City Hall, you can also simply cast your vote by early voting. So far, of the 90,000 ballots, we've received 24,600 completed ballots. 6,000 from early voting in person and over 18,500 in mail. We're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that we count that every vote counts that's cast. But it would help a great deal to have a timeline that supports the special situation that we face this year. On, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday, there was an argument in front of the Supreme Court. And I support the argument that was argued in front of the Supreme Court to require the counting of mail-in votes postmarked by Election Day, not just received by Election Day, and the 10-day extension to make sure there's time to count those votes. This is our democracy, and we should all be making an effort to ensure that everyone's vote is counted. What we saw at the post office a few weeks ago, we're not sure what's going to happen, or I'm certainly not sure what's going to happen in November. And really having that ability about postmarking is so important. If you're looking for information on elections, we're asking you to go to boston.gov/elections or call 311 to learn more and get the information that you need. Just a final word on the psychological impact of COVID. I want us all to remember what people are going through. Illness in themselves or with their loved ones, fear of COVID. Many people have anxiety or anxious around this. People have financial stress, lost income, struggling small businesses. People fear of losing their homes, in the toll of systemic racism. Many experience it personally and also continue to see the footage of violence against black and brown people on social media. All of this together is taking a tremendous toll on a lot of people. It's showing up in mental health concerns, physical health concerns, playing a role in domestic violence and street violence, people struggling with substance use and recovery. For the folks in the recovery community or folks that want to get into the recovery community, meetings are happening online, and some meetings are happening in person outdoors. What I'd ask you to do is you can reach out to our Office of Recovery Services or to a recovery organization about meetings. You can call 311 to get information, or you can call Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous to get information on that. We're asking people to take it a day at a time and continue to look out for your own health and your family's health. I would ask everyone to remember that these are not normal times. The tendencies for conflict will not serve us well in every single situation right now. I ask everyone to work together in a spirit of unity. I urge everyone to be kind to yourself and to others. I ask everyone to take it a day at a time. I have one question that was submitted prior to the press conference, and I'll open up to the press that's here. It's from Alan Miller at WHDH. With college students coming back to Boston, What is your message to them? Well, I first want to remind all of them how far we've come in our fight against the coronavirus as a result of our vigilance of the neighbors here in the city of Boston. Students have always been a valued member of our communities here in Boston. It's important that we collectively, as a city, continue to work hard, not let our guard down, because we still have a long way to go in our recovery. I ask all students, particularly coming from out of states that the numbers are high, to familiarize yourself with our guidance. Follow the guidance laid out by your college, and make every effort to keep yourself and your community safe. And that also does go for the students living off campus. We're asking you to stay connected to your schools to make sure you understand how we move forward. We have been successful in our city over the last several months in keeping our number down, and obviously we dropped a little bit this week, but we still have a lot more work to do. With that, I'm going to open up for questions of the press that's here.
Given the news out of Wisconsin regarding the police shooting of Jacob Blake, can you talk about how there is no police accountability law in Massachusetts, despite there being widespread agreement that there should be one? What do you make of the legislative delay on that, and what needs to be included in whatever legislation comes out of the Congress?
I'm not familiar with the second part of your question on the academy, so I'll get back to you on that. Let me just generally address what I witnessed, what my eyes witnessed in Wisconsin. Enough is enough. This country is going through lots of concerns now, as I mentioned earlier. Talked about trauma, COVID-19, systemic racism. What I witnessed on TV, and I don't have all the facts of the case, but what I witnessed on TV was an atrocity, what happened. And I think that what we're doing in Boston, I can't speak for Wisconsin, I can't speak for Georgia, I can't speak for Minneapolis, I can't speak for any of the other places, I can only speak for Boston. What I can say, what we're doing in Boston is our task force is working. They're going to come back with recommendations in a couple weeks on policing in the city of Boston. I believe they're going to present me with some reforms on policing. Some of that is in training. We've already looked at our training in the city, and we're going to continue to make changes in our training. We have not seen incidences like that happen in Boston. I'm not saying it can never happen, but we haven't seen that here in the city of Boston. I'm hoping to pray to God that we never see that. I think we need to continue to work collectively together as a community, as police departments across the country. But again, I can only speak for Boston. Our police department has not stopped working throughout this time, and they've been reaching out and doing community engagement and having conversations. We're going to continue to do that. As far as the legislation up at the State House, I'm not sure what the holdup is. I'm not privy to the conference committee. There's been really no reports coming out of there about the conference committee. Certainly, we'll see what happens if that legislation passes. And then on the second, I'll have to get you an answer to that one. I don't have that.
Do you have any strong feelings about things that you feel like need to be included in whatever legislation comes out?
A lot of the legislation that's at the State House, quite honestly, Boston's already doing it. So there's things in that legislation that other cities, other police departments around the Commonwealth are not doing that we are doing. So again, I don't want to speculate on what it is until I see a final version of the bill. Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned the question. The first question I just answered was about policing in general, referencing Wisconsin, and then the legislation at the State House. And then this question is about, are we going to implement curfews in East Boston or potentially do that? As of now, no, but I'm going to ask Marty Martinez maybe to come up and talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in East Boston. I mean, I touched upon them, but he can dive a little deeper in it, if you don't mind.
Sure, Mayor. I mean, so we're looking at a multi-pronged approach in East Boston. trying to both do community outreach and engagement with residents, with businesses, with families, and also focused on increasing testing and isolation support, as well as considering how do we look at what's been laid out, where people are gathering, and does that mean we, potentially from a public health side, recommend to the mayor some potential additional restrictions. So we're not there at that point, but what we have to do is make sure people understand social distancing works, wearing a face mask works, not being around people for a long duration of time. We have restrictions already in our parks, so to the mayor's point, to follow those guidelines are really, really important, and to do everything we can to bring that rate down. To give you context, we had about 127 people test positive in East Boston in our last full week, and so that represents about over 11% of people getting tested or testing positive. So it's really, really important to our neighbors in East Boston that we try to follow those restrictions and guidelines.
Great question. The question is, should the Biogen example be something that's held up as an example of how we should be careful? Something, if I paraphrase that. You're absolutely right. The Biogen conference was a global international event that happened here in the city. If you missed it, there was a story in several papers now. I think the Globe was the first one to report it. That one conference of, I think it was about 150 people that were there, potentially were the impetus of 20,000 cases of coronavirus around Massachusetts, around the country, around the world, including homeless population. It's very important for us to understand, if you feel sick, to contact your primary care doctor, because if you test positive for COVID-19, we're going to trace who was around you. And back in February, when that Biogen conference happened, we didn't have this protocol in place. They tried to, but it just got out of control real quickly. So it really is incumbent upon all of us to, if you feel sick, to report to your doctor, to get tested, so we can do the contact tracing, number one. It's also important when people go out to wear masks, because you have no idea. You could have somebody that's asymptomatic that you could get coronavirus from, and if you're in larger groups, spread it around. So that's sitting at the beach next to each other, 2-3 feet apart, not physical distancing. That means going to a restaurant. That means playing soccer in a park. That means hanging on the corner. That means whatever it might be. The Biogen conference really, I think, taught us a very valuable lesson. I'm going to ask Marty if he wants to just expand on that a little bit so people can understand fully what that meant.
Yeah, sorry, just one thing. Absolutely. I mean, the definition of a super spreader event is when people are together for a duration of time. And I can't stress that enough around college. We're talking about these locations where people are inside spaces, lots of people within a small space who are not social distancing and not wearing a mask. So again, that asymptomatic, and the mayor talks about if you feel sick, and if you don't feel sick, the notion of being in small groups and being indoors is really part of that whole notion that sets us up to have multiple people be impacted. We've seen across the country where in colleges and universities, parties and gatherings have led to increased numbers of cases, and that's what we're trying to prevent here in Boston.
As far as those large parties again, especially with all the what's the city plan to do about that? What's your proposal about
Yeah, thank you. The question is, what do we plan to do about college students coming back and partying? I mean, it's hard, right? It's hard to really, you can't go in there and arrest everybody, and that's not what should happen. We're really leaning on colleges and universities to get the message out to their students that they have to be responsible, act responsible. Inspectional services City of Boston Inspectional Services will be sent out to houses that are having parties. My message to college students that are coming back to Boston and they're moving back this weekend and next weekend is very clear. Do not have parties. Do not have parties in your house. Do not have parties in your front yard. Do not have parties on your front porch. Be responsible. You're a college student. You want to be treated as an adult. Act as an adult. Act as somebody responsible. Here in Massachusetts, here in Boston, we're taking coronavirus very, very seriously. We're making sure that people are safe. We're making sure that our families are safe. And what we don't want to see is a large spike in cases. some of these students are coming from places that have rules that are a lot laxed. Want you to know here in Boston, they're not going to be lax. You need to wear a mask. When you're on college campuses, you're going to be tested. I think many colleges are going to test often. So we're asking college students to act responsible here. This is something that, we want to continue to open up Boston. We want to continue to see our restaurants thrive. We want to continue to see, at some point our barrooms thrive. We want to see Boston back. If we get large outbreaks from like a Biogen conference in our city, then what we're doing is we're going to go backwards and shut things down. We want to open up public schools. We're watching the numbers. We're seeing in East Boston now, we don't have the root cause yet of what's going on there, but 11% rate is pretty high. I mean, that's probably around, last time we had 11% in East Boston, or the first time was probably around the end of March, and then it got a lot higher than that. So it's concerning that the numbers are going in the wrong direction. And we're going to do everything we can to bring those numbers down. So college students, you have a responsibility as adults in the city of Boston, and quite honestly the Commonwealth, to act responsibly. I'll come back to you.
Just actually on the voting thing, because it just came across, it looks like the SJC has ruled not to extend the deadline, so I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, the SJC has ruled not to extend the deadline. So my concern there is that the Trump administration is playing around with the post office. Congressman Lynch, Congresswoman Presley, the other day had the postmaster talking to them about machinery that he refused to put back in place, talking about making sure there's no delays in mail, talking about making sure they put extra people on for overtime during this time. We have probably the largest, the most important presidential election in our lifetime is going to be in November. And every 4 years it's that way, because every 4 years the president sets the tone and the direction of the country to go. And with the concerns of people not having faith in the Postal Service, well, first of all, it's a disgrace, because our men and women in our Postal Service work extremely hard to deliver our mail in rain, snow, sleet, sun, whatever it is. And my concern is that Washington, the president, will play games mid-October to the end of October before election happens to discourage people from voting. I think that the fact that the Supreme Court voted down, they have the reasons to vote it down, but the fact is that if somebody mails a ballot in, and this year we're in unique circumstances because we have the ability for mail-in ballots where we otherwise never had that. It's only absentee ballots. I think I said the number is 90,000 requests. So 90,000 Bostonians requested a ballot to be mailed to them so they can mail it back. My concern is many of those still have not been mailed back yet, and there are, I'm doing quick math, 70,000 roughly that have not been mailed back yet. Those votes matter, and if those votes aren't in the mail before the 1st, they don't count, which is unfortunate.
Celtics and Raptors are reportedly considering boycotting Game 1 of their playoff series as a form of protest in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting. Would you support such a boycott?
Yeah, if they boycott, they boycott. I mean, I'd support it. I think it's important. I think that, in our country, we've had many acts of boycott, protest over the last several months here now. I think some cities and states have risen up to the occasion and have begun to work on the issues around racism and systemic racism. I still think that we have certain parts of our government, national government, that are not paying attention to it. As I said from the podium here a few days after George Floyd was murdered, that this feels different. And in Boston, we're going to do everything we can to be a national leader. And I think that that's important. I think boycotts are great, but it's also about action. And and I'm not saying that NBA should be doing that, because right now they're in the midst of their season, and many NBA superstars and players are expressing, letting their voices be heard, and I commend them for that. But I think that it's time for action in this country. It's time for action here in Boston. It's time for action in Massachusetts. It's time for action in this country, quite honestly. You asked me a question earlier about the policing, the incident that happened in Wisconsin, and my response is enough is enough. We also have in Boston, I can only speak for Boston, we have some incredible police officers in our city, men and women, that have spent their career making sure that they do good. When they took that oath of office to become a police officer, they took an oath to be good. We're going to continue to provide the training that we need to provide as we move forward here. You asked me a question about training. The person in Minneapolis that killed George Floyd, he's no longer a police officer. I don't know if any amount of training was going to help that person, because it seemed like what he did went way above and beyond anything that he might have been taught or trained in the police academy. But as a community, we have to look deep inside of ourselves, and we have to continue to work together. Over the last month or so, I've heard a lot of people are tired about this and tired about hearing about that, and not enough work is done over here. We need to be compassionate with each other, and we need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to take a day at a time, battling systemic racism in all of its forms. One of the reasons why I would like to see our kids go back in school is because of an achievement gap. We have to do it safely. We have to make sure that we have to, and I'm pushing that because of our Black and Latino students are the kids that have the largest achievement gap. If we don't have that, we have to rally around our school kids. We can't just let that achievement gap grow. So I don't know what words I can say here today that that people want to hear or don't want to hear. If that's what the Celtics and Raptors do tonight, is it tonight the first game? I think it's tomorrow night. I commend them for it. But it's not just about not playing a basketball game. It's about hearing the message that those players are passing on to us. It's the message of not playing that game and what the reasoning behind that message is. And I think that we have to pay attention to that and pay attention to the different messages that are being sent. And if we continue as a society to ignore and avoid those messages, we'll be in the same exact situation that we're in today, next month, next year, next decade. All right, thank you, everybody.